You board a Qantas A380 in Sydney, ready for a 14-hour flight to Johannesburg. The engines roar, the massive jet climbs into the sky, and everything seems normal. But halfway through the journey, something unexpected happens. The plane turns around. 9 hours later, you're back in Sydney, exactly where you started. What could possibly force one of the most advanced aircraft in the world to abandon a long-haul flight and head home? This is the story of Qantas flight QF63, the 9-hour flight to nowhere. On September 30th, 2025, Qantas flight QF63, an Airbus A380 named Phyllis Arnott, prepared for takeoff from Sydney's Kingsford Smith Airport. It was a routine long-haul flight, connecting Australia with South Africa, one of the few routes in the world operated entirely within the Southern Hemisphere. Scheduled to depart at 9:30 a.m., the aircraft finally pushed back at 10:13 a.m., about 43 minutes late. Nothing unusual so far. The A380 lifted off, its 4 Rolls-Royce Trent 972 engines carrying 410 passengers and a dozen crew members on the 14-hour trek across the Indian Ocean. The flight passed over Victoria and Tasmania before heading southwest. The point of no return was approaching. Once the aircraft left the Australian coast, it would be flying thousands of kilometers over open ocean, far from any alternate airports. That's when the problem appeared. Somewhere south of Tasmania, the crew noticed a critical issue. The aircraft's satellite communication system had failed. Now, to most passengers, this might sound like a simple Wi-Fi problem. But in aviation, SATCOM is far more important than in-flight internet. It's how the flight crew communicates with air traffic control when flying over oceans where there are no radio towers. And it's also tied to the aircraft's navigation and performance data. Without satellite connectivity, the A380 couldn't safely meet international ETOPS and RNP standards. Those are the strict rules governing how far twin or quad-engine aircraft can fly from diversion airports. In short, if the crew lost communication and navigation support mid-ocean, they'd be on their own. The pilots had a decision to make: continue across the Indian Ocean with limited systems, or return to Sydney where maintenance could investigate the issue. They chose the safest option. Flight QF63 began turning around over the Southern Ocean, looping back toward the Australian mainland. No emergency was declared, because the aircraft itself wasn't in danger, but the flight was technically unable to continue its long-haul mission. From a passenger's perspective, things were confusing. There was no panic, just confusion, as the moving map showed the jet slowly veering back towards Sydney. 9 hours after takeoff, that's right, 9 hours in total, the aircraft touched down again at the same airport it had departed from. A 9-hour flight to nowhere. Imagine being one of those 410 passengers. You've spent half a day in the air, only to see the Sydney skyline appear once again out the window. Qantas handled the situation calmly. Passengers were asked to disembark, provided with overnight accommodation, and rebooked on a replacement flight to Johannesburg the next morning. No one was injured, and no emergency landing was required. But it certainly became one of the most frustrating flight experiences imaginable. And for the aviation community, it became a fascinating case study in how even small system failures can completely alter a long-haul operation. The A380 involved, registration VHOQL, has an interesting history. It's named Phyllis Arnott after Australia's first woman to hold a commercial pilot's license, who came from the famous Arnott's biscuit family. Delivered in December 2011, the aircraft can carry 485 passengers across 4 classes, 14 in first, 70 in business, 60 in premium economy, and 341 in economy. Like many A380s, it spent years grounded during the pandemic, stored in Victorville, California. It returned to service in 2023 and underwent major refurbishment earlier in 2025, featuring Qantas's new business suite and upgraded in-flight entertainment. Ironically, just months after its return, the aircraft faced this technical hiccup. Not mechanical, but digital. A reminder that modern aviation relies as much on satellites and data as on engines and wings. After landing back in Sydney, Qantas engineers worked through the night to troubleshoot the issue. Whatever caused the satellite outage was resolved quickly. The next day, VHOQL was back in the air, this time operating flight QF11 from Sydney to Los Angeles. No issues were reported. That's the beauty of modern aviation maintenance. Problems can be fixed, verified, and cleared within hours, thanks to redundant systems and data analysis tools that track every aspect of an aircraft's performance. So why is this story so interesting? Because it highlights how fragile long-haul operations can be, even with the most advanced aircraft. An Airbus A380 can fly halfway around the world, but without satellite communication, it's grounded. It's also a perfect example of how aviation safety prioritizes prevention over reaction. Qantas could have continued the flight and risked losing communication mid-ocean. But they didn't. Instead, they burned through thousands of liters of fuel, delayed hundreds of passengers, and spent a fortune on hotels, all in the name of safety. And that's why the aviation industry remains the safest mode of transport on Earth. For passengers, this was a long day. But for Qantas engineers and flight crews, it was a success story in safety discipline. No corners were cut, no risks were taken, and no lives were endangered. It's also a good reminder of how interconnected aviation has become. From satellites in orbit to sensors in the cockpit, every component plays a part in getting you safely from point A to point B. In the end, flight QF63 will be remembered not for a crash or a crisis, but for what didn't happen. No one was hurt. No system failed catastrophically. The pilots made the right call, the engineers fixed the issue, and passengers eventually reached their destination, a day late, but safe. Sometimes a flight to nowhere is the best outcome possible. If you love real-life aviation stories like this one, from bizarre turnarounds to near-miss incidents, make sure you hit subscribe, turn on the bell icon, and join the Travel Deck community for more skies, stories, and secrets. Until next time, safe travels and blue skies.